In the previous video, we went over pre-built and turnkey solutions, the various storage solutions available these days that when combined can make a very flexible and powerful set of tools. In this video, we'll be looking at what it takes to build your own NAS. We'll look at the operating system we chose, TrueNAS scale, what hardware we chose, their operating system in mind, as well as considerations for both noise levels and power consumption. We will list some of the basic items you need to set up a server rack, as well as your NAS box. And finally, we will briefly go over how to install TrueNAS using a thumb drive and some cool features of my motherboard like IPMI. So, building your own NAS, who's it for and when is it really worth it? Whether you're a PC tinkerer or someone who just by his trade knows a decent amount about PC hardware, you'll notice that a lot of NAS and cloud solutions are essentially the same thing, but with a different specialization. They are all essentially a PC box with some flavor of Linux or BTRFS running either in your home or on a server in a warehouse. With that in mind, you realize that while significantly higher costs for turnkey solutions make sense, as they usually come all ready to go and with a supportive staff to back it up, if you're willing to work just a little bit more, you can get enterprise-like solutions, but at a significantly lower price. And it might even be better tailored to your needs. This is where TrueNAS and Unraid can become a very attractive option when it comes to operating systems. Be forewarned, if this NAS is for work, make sure you really know what you're doing, or else risk a catastrophic loss of data and potentially a very lengthy phone call with an upset client, or worse yet, a lost client. This risk can be mitigated with secondary and tertiary backups, but nonetheless needs to be said. Another way to have peace of mind is you could reach out to a group of professionals to help you with your setup. While I set up my own NAS and network configuration, I had Eric from Lawrence Systems spend an hour reviewing my work to make sure I didn't make any mistakes, and he helped me optimize my setup as well. Personally, when I was considering purchasing a turnkey NAS solution for myself, I reached out to several vendors, including IX Systems, 45 Drives, and other World Computing Jellyfish. The systems they offered were often not quite what I needed, and the pricing, while understandable, was hard to justify when compared to consumer solutions from QNAP and Synology. QNAP and Synology were more realistic for my budget, but while their simplicity and ease of use was attractive, their inflexible configuration also made them less viable for me, not to mention the very limited upgradability and expansion options. However, all these products left me with a solid blueprint of what I needed to build on my own NAS. With some research and suggestions from great communities like TrueNAS and Level 1 Techs, I came up with this build below. Later, I will also talk about planning your server rack space as well as your connectivity with 25 gigabit fiber and the required Thunderbolt adapters for Mac systems, so stay tuned for that. Before talking about the hardware we chose, let's talk about our software choice, TrueNAS Scale, and how software dictates the hardware we should use. TrueNAS is an open source program supported by IX Systems, who designed the OS primarily for their enterprise products. I have talked to several members at IX Systems, and overall, I really like and support their business model. IX Systems does in fact work with several large-scale post-production houses. They even have a great solution for small-sized post teams, such as the TrueNAS Mini, but in my specific case, where I straddle the line between prosumer and enterprise, a custom solution worked best. Now that we mentioned our software choice, let's take a quick look at our hardware setup. TrueNAS and its file system ZFS benefit greatly from large quantities of RAM, as well as CPUs with a higher clock speed, so it is important to factor these in when deciding your build. The TrueNAS community has also found greater success in compatibility when using Supermicro motherboards and Intel CPUs. Also, avoid using interfaces using Realtek. Lots of folks seem to have had bad experiences with them, something to do with the firmware on their drivers. For my build, I'm using AMD's EPYC 7302 Plus CPU because of its very high amount of PCIe lanes, which is needed for all my NVMe storage, something noted and used more and more frequently by enterprise NAS solutions as well. The NVMe SSDs I'm using are not the latest or greatest, but they provide a good balance of endurance, speed, and price. While NVMe Gen 3 drives are nowhere near as fast as Gen 4 or Gen 5, their latency, throughput speed, and random access is more than enough for some of the most demanding tasks in post-production. And more importantly, these can be further improved both with connectivity, 25 gigabit versus 10 gigabit, and also your RAID-Z setup. To connect the SSDs to my motherboard, I'm using a Broadcom HBA card. My motherboard comes with a single slim SAS SFFF8654 connection, but I needed two more to connect the 6 NVMe SSDs that I'm using. All three of these cables are connected to an IC dock bay, compatible with both U.2 and U.3 drives, which makes installation a breeze. For the power supply, I went with a 850 watt PSU from EVGA because the CPU and NVMe drives I'm using don't require a lot of power. If you're using hard drives and a lot of them, consider getting a higher wattage PSU. For the case, there are many options out there. Sliger and Silverstone are highly rated. For my needs, the Roswell 12-bay hot swap case I got gave me exactly what I needed. I also purchased some Noctua fans to replace the fans of the case, as well as those of the IC dock bay. This isn't strictly required, but it did help significantly lower the noise levels on my NAS box. And finally, I recommend looking at cable mods. They can provide power cables that are compatible with your specific PSU, as well as fan extension cables and Molex cables to allow you to lay out your system with ease and exactly how you want to. The total price for the system is just under $3,000 without drives and networking. That is to say, the system is cheaper than two of the consumer-facing products while having better specs and more flexibility when it comes to your upgrade path. Those savings can immediately be passed on to purchasing the expensive storage for NVMe drives and our networking setup. One of the reasons a lot of the high-end solutions were not really an option for me is that they're designed to run in a dedicated server room, where louder noise levels are an acceptable trade-off for better airflow for the components. In my case, where the server rack is in the same room as my editing station, right there, I need my components to be as quiet as possible, which is why I built in a 4U tall server chassis, where I could install some powerful but quiet Noctua fans to cool my system. The same is true for the MikroTik switch I'm using, as it is barely audible with the exception of the booting sequence. Another topic that isn't discussed frequently enough is power consumption and power draw. A desktop PC and a couple of laptops are unlikely to flip a breaker, but once you start adding on top of that a NAS system, network switches, and all the other equipment that comes with it, it's an important consideration to make sure your office or home can run all your machines with clean and stable power, not to mention lowering your electric bill. Depending on your needs, I recommend looking into a server rack. You can build a NAS in a regular PC case too, but if you have multiple systems already, a server rack can help you maximize your vertical space, especially when you start adding all your networking hardware on top of your NAS, PC, and Mac systems. It can also help you when it comes to troubleshooting and cable management. Having everything organized and easy to access makes it easy and less likely you're going to make mistakes when troubleshooting. Assembling your NAS can be a lot of fun. Opening up all these new boxes with interesting pieces of hardware made me feel like a kid on Christmas. If there's any advice I can give you here is take your time. Plan what you're doing first and go step by step. Label your cables to make it easier when troubleshooting. One tip I definitely recommend is before putting everything in your server chassis, test your core components. Plug in your CPU, RAM into your motherboard and to the PSU, and then make sure that your system boots and that in your BIOS, your hardware is recognized and working correctly. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install TrueNAS on our system. To do that, there's a couple steps we need to take. If you look at my desktop right now, let me switch over. I recommend that you go on the TrueNAS website where they go in great detail about how to set up your install correctly, including setting up a device media or bootable thumb drive to make the installation process really easy. To do that, we need to install, or rather download two things. We need to download TrueNAS Scale, the latest stable version, and then the actual software, in this case Etcher, to set up our thumb drive correctly. So we have already downloaded these two things, and I've already installed Etcher. So if you were to boot up Etcher, you'll probably be greeted by this screen. And in this one, we're gonna select two things. First, we're gonna select the TrueNAS file that we downloaded here. So let me go ahead and do that. And it should end with .iso. So we're gonna go ahead and open that. And then we're gonna select the target, which in our case is the thumb drive. So we're gonna go ahead and select that. Proceed, and then we're gonna flash it. It's gonna ask you probably for your admin password. And obviously, everything that was on this thumb drive is going to get wiped. So make sure you don't have anything there important because it'll be completely erased. This process does take a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this part. Okay, now we have a bootable flash drive. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and plug this into our system back there and install TrueNAS. Now that we've created a bootable thumb drive with the install files ready to go and plugged into our system, we're going to go ahead and boot our system. Now we can do this in two ways. We can either physically press the power button on the system, connect a keyboard, mouse, and monitor, or because we have IPMI, we can do this through our main machine we're using right now. So let's go ahead and go over to our desktop and we log in, and through this login, I'll be able to see what is connected to my router, which includes my NAS IPMI connection. So we will log in, and obviously for security reasons, everything here is blurred for the purposes of this video. But in here, you'll see one of the connections is the address we want. It might not actually show up here, in which case for your first time when you're setting your IPMI, you might need to load into the BIOS and go to a specific page. And I'll show you how to get there. But in our case, because we already know our address, we're gonna go ahead and enter that into our browser. And this shows that you have a successful connection to your IPMI. And again, just to reiterate, usually the username and password are unique to your Supermicro motherboard, and you will find it on a sticker, usually somewhere around either the back of the motherboard or near where you have your M.2 drives. So we're going to go ahead and put our credentials in. And once we do that, we are here on the dashboard. And if we go over here to remote control, we can access our system. You do actually get a little preview window here that shows that our system is already running. But if you want to actually control it, you would click here, and then you're going to click on Launch Console, and you will get a window. You sometimes will get this pop-up error, and it is generally recommended to use Chrome. It's the most compatible. For my use case, Safari is just fine. And here you can see that our system is up and running. We can actually use our buttons up here. And this is useful if your system is completely off. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to press power. So we're going to shut down the system. And I'm going to show you how to boot it from a cold start. Okay, now I don't know if you can actually hear it, but the system is winding down. The fans usually kick up a bit and then they shut off. And now we're going to go back to my desktop, and you can see I'm greeted by a gray screen. So now we're going to go ahead and boot our system. So we're going to go up here, press on this power button. We're going to select power on. I don't know if you can hear that, but the fans are spinning up right now. So the system has turned on its own. And so the useful thing about this is that you're able to power cycle and restart or shut down your system, even if you are not present in the office where this is happening. So right now we're booting up and we're greeted by the boot up screen. So in our case, you'll see an option to press the delete key, and we will. This will allow us to enter the setup. You can see that it has registered our key press. We're gonna go into our BIOS. If for whatever reason it is not registering your keyboard, you can also use this. This will allow you to press delete as well and use this as your virtual keyboard. And as I was saying, this is really powerful because if you happen to not be in your office or elsewhere and there is an update that you need to do, or for whatever reason you need to restart your NAS or shut it down and then turn it back on, you're not locked out of the system. You're able to access it through the IPMI and power cycle it as many times as you want without needing to be physically present. All right, so here we are in the BIOS. In the BIOS, there's a lot of settings we could go over. The first screen you're usually greeted by is the main tab, and this is where it will give you your basic system information, your motherboard, the BIOS version, and so forth. Another very important tab is your IPMI tab, and this is where if you were unable to find an IP password for your system, it would be over here. You would find it and be able to access it that way. For security reasons, mine is currently blurred on your screen, but this is where you would be able to use that to then access your system remotely. Finally, as if we're installing TrueNAS for the first time, we're going to go to the Save and Exit tab. We're going to go ahead and select our thumb drive, which is the same SanDisk we were using before. So we're going to go ahead and hit Enter. And now what it is going to do is it's going to make sure that we boot from the thumb drive. Here we are greeted by the TrueNAS installation. If you wanted to do something custom, you could select it. But in our case, a basic TrueNAS installation is what we want. So we're just gonna hit Enter. Okay, and here we are in the TrueNAS install GUI. And it is a very straightforward GUI. It's very easy to use. You can use shell commands if you want to. If you have a system already installed like I do, you can just select shutdown. I'm gonna go just one step further and show you the next menu, which is if you go into the install and upgrade, you can see here that it detects all the drives in our system currently. We have 4 NVMe drives for our larger pool, which will, at the end of this, be 6, but for now we only have 4 installed. We're using 2 other ones to test something. And then we have our boot pool, which is consistent of 2 basic Samsung SATA flash drives. So you don't have to have a mirror setup for your boot drive. You can have a single drive. For my peace of mind, I like to have 2. So in the case of corruption or some kind of strange error that's unexpected or drive failure, you do have the second one to fall back to. In fact, this has happened to me. These drives I've used on other projects. They're not the newest, and I had one of them fail. But because I had a perfect mirror, I was able to pull out that drive, put in a new one, and it rebuilt it in 10 minutes with very little effect on my performance during my work. So what you would do is you'd hit spacebar on the drives you want to create a mirror with, and then you'd press OK. In my case, I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna because I already have a system installed. But after this, you will have 2 menus. One which confirms your boot pool, and a second which will have you set up your root password, which is what you're going to use to access your system. So we're going to pretend that we've completed the process, and we're going to hit power, and we're going to do power cycle. Okay, here we are. We are rebooting, and it's going to go ahead and complete the install. In my case, it's just going to load up our existing installation. Okay, so this is the part where if you've completed your setup, you'll be greeted by this screen, and you can do any additional changes here. We're just going to let the countdown expire and move on. Now it's going to go ahead and load everything into our RAM. Okay, and this shows right here that we have completed our setup successfully, and it will show you a series of IPs. If for whatever reason it doesn't see your correct IP, what you want to do is press 1 and go into your network configuration. So you're going to press 1, select, and what you'll do is you'll find your IP, and usually if you have connected everything correctly to your switch, and we'll go over that in another video, this setup everything should be already be working. If for whatever reason you're not getting the correct IP, go ahead and access the IP you have at the moment, and we can change everything in the GUI. So obviously for my own security, I have blurred out all the IPs here. So we're gonna go ahead and pretend that everything is correct, and we're gonna go ahead and type in the IP into our browser. And here you'll be greeted finally by the TrueNAS scale screen. And right here, we're gonna type in the default name for the admin, and then we're gonna type in the password that we set up during install. So we're gonna go log in, and here we go. We're finally greeted by the TrueNAS scale GUI. And here it will give you a ton of information. It might seem like a lot, but it's really straightforward. It shows you all your different devices, your network connections, and you're able to very easily troubleshoot if something is not detected or not working correctly. I'm going to quickly go into system settings and show you that our boot system is installed correctly. So if we go to boot pool status up here, you can see this is our basic mirror where we have 2 drives set up correctly. And so if one of them should fail, the other one will have all your data and you're able to rebuild it. Again, you don't really necessarily need to create a mirror for your boot pool. I just like it for my peace of mind and safety. And with that, we're going to end for today. In the next video, we're gonna talk about our network configuration, how to set up our MikroTik switch, troubleshooting, and a lot more. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. And as always, happy cutting.